What is the best Resident Evil game out there today? I don't know about you guys. It's subjective, sure, but I can certainly give you my Resident Evil games tier list. This is something that's quite new to me, in the sense that I'm catching up on these tier lists, you know. I've been seeing these tier lists for years, but only in fighting games. But now everyone seems to be doing them, whether it's Resident Evil, wrestling, you name it, there's a tier list section for it. So looking at this one, I really do want to do more of these, you know. This is going to be cool. It's going to be interesting. Let's get right to it. Okay, so here we go. First of all, I'd like to direct you guys to the row that you see just at the bottom of the screen. There's actually another row beneath that one, but those will consist of games I will not be ranking in this video, for reasons I will go into later on. But for now, from left to right, we've got 0, Resident Evil, the Remake, 2, Remake 2, 3, Code Veronica X, 4, 5, 6 and 7. And then the Revelations games. But for now we've got 0. I'm putting that straight into B. It's not a terrible game. It's a great game, in my opinion. But there are a few things that let it down from being an A or an S. To name a few of those, the item management can get a bit overwhelming at times. You spend, I believe, most of the game in your inventory, or at least I do. My playthroughs at least. I'm not down with a young Marcus standing on a cliff singing to baby leeches or whatever the fuck. You know, I'm not down with that at all. And the leech men in general are a bit of a bastard as well. But the bosses, the gameplay itself is pretty solid. The music, yeah, it's pretty cool. Then we've got this bad boy, the one that started it all. That's getting sent to B as well. I flirted with A or B. Ultimately, you know, it does deserve respect. It is the founder. It is the original one. It still has some great gameplay, of course. Laughs galore. Who can deny the laughs? But ultimately, it is still rough around the edges. And there are other games in the series that I would rather play above that one. So it gets a B from me. Now we have Resident Evil Remake. No introduction needed. I'm putting that straight into S. It did everything right, and then some. It sets an example. This is how you do a remake. And it's little to be faulted, quite frankly. There's not really much I can say about this game that you don't know, the viewer, already. If you're unfamiliar with this game, my god, just play it. Now we have Resident Evil 2, the original. No introduction necessary. This goes into the S category, and I don't think I need to justify why, but for reasons just for this particular tier list, of course, the gameplay, of course, is amazing. The scenario systems, the enemies, the boss fights, the characters that you get to play, the extra modes, the music, everything, the puzzles, just all meshed together into a lovely glob of deliciousness. Now we have the remake. This goes into B. Of course, I've talked a lot about this on this channel. I've covered it quite a lot. I've rinsed this game. I have the honour of obtaining the Platinum Trophy for the PS4, of course. And no matter how many times I play this game, right, Mr. X will always give me severe anxiety. And if this game can do that after over a year now, then that's great. Obviously, the gameplay itself is solid. It lacks from the scenario systems and the music, but ultimately it's great. In terms of the third game in the original series, this gets a B from me as well. I did toy actually with the thought, should I put it in A or B? But ultimately it's a B. The choice mechanic is great. You do get, you know, a couple of endings you can obtain. This game really does have replayability based off of, well, just its gameplay alone, but also the choice mechanic. Nemesis, obviously, is a great reason to play this game. He adds a lot of depth to the game as well, but it's not quite up there with 2. Code Veronica X gets an A. This is a game I've played a lot of in the last handful of months. This is the hardest game in the series, but I think that Resident Evil 0 is a close second. Now, having played this game quite a lot of it is quite easy to me now, but it is still quite a challenging game, especially if you haven't played it for so many years and you've just forgotten it, or if you're a new player to the game. It has a great story, although it's absurd, but its gameplay really does save it. The graphics don't really hold up too well today, but it's still okay. Resident Evil 4 goes into the B category, but I have toyed thinking about this tier list beforehand, putting it in the C category. But ultimately, it does go in the B category. It is a great game, but it's not as high as a lot of people in this world rate it. The castle, which is a large portion of this game, is a bit of a drag, and there's so many people that feel the same way, and it just baffles me how you can still say that this is a 10 out of 10 game, or a 9 out of 10 game. The merchant, the guns, the bosses, the enemies, the horror is there in some aspects as well. The tension is certainly there. It's all great, but it's a B for me. It's a B for me. Resident Evil 5. This goes into the C category. It's a great co-op game to play. This is the main reason you should play this game with a friend, especially if you're both Resident Evil nuts. But again, something that I don't like about this game is where they kind of took the story. I don't like how they killed off Wesker. I thought that was over the top, and they kind of killed Wesker in this game anyway, before he actually died, if you know what I mean. It's a cool Wesker, but yeah. It's a great game in a way, but it's still lacking the horror and everything like that. But it is fun to play. My God, is it fun to play. Resident Evil 6. I like dinosaurs. I really do like dinosaurs. I'm an avid dinosaur buff, but I don't want to see a T-Rex in this game. The way there's not. I don't know whether to put. I think it goes into the D category. It goes into D. So it's a terrible Resident Evil game. It's not an unplayable game. That would be an F. It gets bumped up from E to D because if you play this game with someone, it is great, but there's so many absurdities in this game. I'm going to need a whole new video just for that. It goes in D, and it counts itself lucky for that. Resident Evil 7 goes into the B category. This was actually a great game as well, in my opinion. It doesn't really feel too much like Resident Evil, so that's why it doesn't really get an A or an S. The gameplay is solid, the enemies are great, but there's a little bit too few of the variations. There's just not as many enemy types as I would have liked. Another enemy type or two would have been good. But the story is great, the tension and the horror is absolutely there, and the acting is great, phenomenal, one of the best I've seen in any game. Revelations. Again, a lot of people seem to rate this quite high, but for me it's a fairly decent, slightly above average Resident Evil game in my opinion. I appreciate its roots, where it came from, where it started, on the handheld consoles of course, but the characters and the story just didn't really do it for me. The gameplay is pretty cool, but yeah, it's a C for me. Then we have the sequel, Revelations 2. This one I found to be not very fun. I didn't really like this. I played the game once, I found it to be a bit of a chore, a bit of a drag. I wasn't really invested, so I'm putting it in D because of those reasons. I don't really want to play this game ever again. I've got no want to. I mean, maybe just to see if I can give it another chance in the future, some point maybe, but you know, again, it's not an unplayable game or anything like that. I guess Alex Wesker and that kind of story is still there, and I just don't really. I'm not really down with that story. So yeah, it's a D from me. And as far as these other games, okay, let me get into this now. So I've played all of these games except for Gaiden and Umbrella Corps. I haven't played Gaiden because, well, although it was Leon and Barry, it wasn't really the Resident Evil games I played, you know, and it's not one that you really need to play, is it? So that one I've never ever touched. Umbrella Corps, I've seen the gameplay of that. I wasn't expecting much to begin with, of course, but I will never give this game any money, and that's all I had to say about that. But as far as the other games, I've played them, but I don't think I've played them all the way through. So it would be unfair of me to put these in any of the tier list right here. So I'm going to stick with these titles, and surprisingly, Resident Evil Code Veronica X is my third best game. That's interesting. I never really knew what my first, second and third best games were. I can never decide between the remake and Resident Evil 2. I just cannot make that decision. But if someone had a gun to my head, I might lean one whole percent to Resident Evil Remake, because it is what it is. If you've played it, chances are you understand what I'm talking about. But Resident Evil 2 is right up there with it. But Resident Evil Code Veronica X is such a meaty game. There's lots to do in it, there's lots to explore, different locations. It definitely deserves that spot. And as far as the other games there, that seems to be about right as well. I'd rather play Resident Evil Remake and the original Resident Evil 2 more than I would Code Veronica X. And I'd rather play Code Veronica X than 0, the original Resident Evil, so on and so forth. Down and down the columns. So, yeah, there we have it. My tier list for the Resident Evil games. Well, the ones that I've played anyway. If you want to post your tier lists down in the comment section, please feel free to do so. I'd be very interested to see what you guys rate as your top ranking Resident Evil games. I mean, Resident Evil fans, these days we come from all walks of life, don't we? So, I mean, some people prefer 4, 5 and 6. It is what it is. That's opinions for you, you know what I'm talking about. No one's wrong. It's just what you grew up with, what you remember, what's familiar to you. And of course, gameplay and sound design and graphics all help as well, of course, up-to-date technology. But sometimes it's all about heart. Sometimes it's all about heart. If you've got any suggestions for tier lists, anything like that, please also feel free to mention them down in the comments. I want to do more of these. This one was fun. But for now, I'm going to leave it right there. I hope you enjoyed this tier list, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.